Okay, this is a short video showing the basics of making a synthesizer in Max for Live, and it's going to be able to take MIDI in. So, the first thing I've done, I've made a blank live session here, and the first thing I'm going to do is save it. So I'm going to go to the desktop and save this as example synth. Choosing save like that creates a folder. So this folder has the live session in it, and it also has other folders that are going to contain everything else. So as long as I choose collect all and save at various points while I'm working on my live session, all of the stuff that I'm using, all the synthesizers I make, and all the sound clips I'm using will all get put in here too. That's very important, especially if you're not working on your own computer. You want to be able to save your project all in one place so you can come back to it later. Okay, next thing, if I'm making a synthesizer that takes MIDI, we'll need a MIDI tune to play. So I'm going to double click on a blank clip here, blank slot, and get a clip, and just make a simple tune. I'm just going to make a scale just to test and see if my synth actually works. And why not? I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call it scale. So now I'm ready to make a synthesizer. So I've highlighted my track, I go to Max for Live, and I choose Max Instrument, and I'm going to double click, and I get the blank template here. And if I click the edit button, it opens up in Max, so now I'm in Max. And the first thing I'm going to do now that I'm in Max is I'm going to choose Save As, and I'm going to call this Simple Synth 1. So notice if I click that away and go back to Live, my instrument is called Simple Synth 1, and any changes I make are going to get saved under that name. As advertised, this is going to be a very simple synthesizer, and I'm going to basically just be using MIDI to drive a sine wave. So we have MIDI coming in here, and the next thing I do is I use a MIDI parse object to break that up into different pieces. All those different pieces come out these different outlets, and the one I'm interested in is the left outlet that gives me a list of pitch and velocity. So remember, in Max, a list is two numbers separated by spaces, and I can unpack those using the unpack object that'll split that list apart into two different numbers. So down here, I've got MIDI note, and I'm going to use an object called M to F, and that stands for MIDI to frequency. That's going to turn that MIDI note into a frequency, and I can use that frequency to drive a sound wave, like a cycle object. So here's a simple sine wave. Coming down the other side here, we've got MIDI velocity. So that's going to be 128 distinct values. Remember that MIDI often is limited to 128 different values. And those values are going to go from 0 to 127. So I'm going to use a scale object that says that between the range of 0 and 127 coming in, I want from 0 to 1 out. And notice that my output is defined as being floating point numbers, decimal numbers. And the reason I want decimal numbers is that I want something that's useful for multiplying against this waveform here to be able to control volume. So this wave digital output is going to be, an amplitude of 0 or an amplitude of 1, 0 being minimum, 1 being maximum, with intermittent values in between. So I'm going to be using the scale object here to convert these incoming numbers from 0 to 127 into outgoing numbers from 0 to 1. And those are going to drive this multiply object. Multiply tilde, so tilde is for audio rate. I have my sound wave coming in here, and then here I'm going to have my volume. But I don't want a continuous volume control. I want to be able to ramp notes on and off. And to do that, I'm going to use a line object. So a line object basically just draws a line to whatever new destination value you give it. The destination value goes in here, the left inlet, and the ramp time goes here. The ramp time is going to be in milliseconds. So every time I get a number here, I need to do two things. I need to set the ramp time, and then I need to set the destination value. One way to do that is just set up a trigger object. So I'm going to have a trigger object that outputs a float at the left inlet and a bang at the right inlet. And remember that in Max, these inlets are going to be triggered from right to left, so this bang is going to go first, and I'm going to make a message with a 20 in it. So this is just going to give me a set ramp time that I can't change of 20 milliseconds. So this is a very simple envelope generator that I'm making here. And it says whether I'm fading up to a value or ramping back down to 0, it's always going to be 20 milliseconds. That left inlet on the trigger, the one that fires second, is just going to pass my floating point number directly to line here. So whatever volume that is, anywhere from 0 to 1, that's just going to go through here, and that's going to get used to multiply my sound. So now that I've done all of that, I'm going to save it and click it away, and notice that all of that updates here. And if I turn my volume down a little bit and push play here, we can hear that the synth works. Hooray. So that is an extremely simple way of making a synthesizer in Live, and you can build on that to add more complexity and different kinds of modulation and maybe different kinds of enveloping as well. Now that I've made my synth and I can hear that everything is working, I'm going to go to File and choose Collect All and Save. Click Yes to everything. And just to make sure, I can look at my desktop, go inside my project folder, and I can see that buried deep in here is that synth that I just made, Simple Synth 1. There's now a copy of that in this project folder that's stored locally. And if I zip this up and bring it to another machine that has Ableton Live and Max for Live on it, I can open it up and my synth will be there ready to use.